Scorn has been a part of my life for a long time. For almost my entire teenagehood and my whole adulthood, in fact. The first trailer came out in 2014 when I was 15 years old. I'm now 23, and much about me has changed. I moved cities, I worked different jobs, bounced around hobbies, but Scorn was weirdly a constant. Blame the fact that a favorite movie of mine from the time it came out was, well, John Carpenter's The Thing, and I had seen Aliens not long after that. Sometimes interests and ideas just get so deeply embedded in one's psyche that they feel latched on, like you've been stabbed and flesh and fat grew around and expanded around the blade until scar tissue secured it in place. I have to admit, I felt a little bit of an apprehensive dread going into it, though. Not because of its beautiful droning music or the surreal aesthetic that's so easy to compare to Geiger it feels like I'm insulting your intelligence even doing so. That dread was the wonderful floating feeling of terror I've come to expect from a good horror game. The apprehension came from the fact that, well, Scorn's a game with a development history that is pockmarked with massive changes. It was supposed to come out as a full game with a bunch of mechanics, then as a two-parter game, then as a full, very short game, which we now have. I was worried because when it comes to games I've thought about for years with tumultuous development histories, I've been burned before.
Hello there, Night City! Stanley here with you, and we got another day ahead of us in this city of dreams.
Scorn, though. My fucking god. Let's get this out of the way. Everyone who says the combat sucks and is the worst part of the game is right. It might be there to make the game not a walking sim, but the inherent terror and actually the motivating force of the game is its aesthetics and its horrific imagery, the mounting feeling of existential dread that every action you perform makes you feel. The game is at its strongest when you do not understand why you do these things, when you try to piece together a narrative, and the combat distracts from your attempts to do so. It's also the best way they could have integrated combat into a game like this, but I still would have preferred the walking sim. The game's strengths are in visual storytelling. Do I know what the fuck is going on? Absolutely not, though it feels like there's a lot of pregnancy, surgery, and social metaphors going on here. Life clinging to and parasitizing its host, people being ripped apart and formed into things they aren't supposed to be, your characters shifting and changing as parasitic spikes penetrate through their flesh, causing pain and fear and confusion. It's a setting so overgrown with meat and creatures so strange that comparison fails me. Outside of the queue of all tomorrow's fame, analogy feels pointless. The game's first puzzle concludes with what might be the perfect tone setter. After extracting an egg from the wall, sorry, the game's just like this, you find it holds a scared thing. A morass of limbs and a whimpering voice reaching out to you, begging not to be hurt. You will hurt it anyway. My friend group nicknamed this guy Shelly. You bring him over to a machine and, well, Shelly and the scoop machine is just one example of the game's strongest element. Its ability to throw strange and bizarre imagery at you, contextualize it perfectly, and then make you go, what the fuck? This whole time I've been wondering what the purposes of the different machines are, what the things around me are, what the creatures are, and the game answers it very simply. Welcome to the abattoir. This is industrial mass death. Living creatures scooped brutally out of their shells, floors covered in blood and bile, machines designed for killing. Throughout the game, you torture yourself, push aside the dead, you crawl through buildings designed like a sarcophagi, and my god, you are a piece of meat being pushed through that infinite gullet, and the whole time, you are getting answers that only provoke more and more disturbing questions. I suspect Scorn will be the source of many theory crafting videos that I will not be a part of. There's two reasons for that. One, I respect myself far too much to ever do a MatPat. I have my theories, but for now I will keep them private. And two, this game is very much so rooted in Heideggerian philosophy. In its development, it was even called Scorn Design, and I'm sorry, I don't even know what design is. I've looked up so many definitions. I'm just not the person to tell you what this game is about. The game's real fun to play if you like dark stuff, obviously. It's so dedicated to this feeling of discomfort and pain. The way that blood drips from your arm, the grossness of an impaled wound, the pallid and raw flesh of the main character that looks like a medical diagram, the pulsating and disgusting rawness of the meat. It's all wonderful. Low droning sounds make up the bulk of the music, and you always hear something squamously slithering around. Even when this aesthetic breaks, it feels knit together. The ending of this game takes place in this vast outdoor marble temple of copper statues and mechanics, wholly distinct from the abattoir you left, but it still fits. You know you're somewhere new, somewhere foreign, but it's the same society that made these things, the same people. And it's no less comfortable for being clean either. I appreciate that this game did once offer comfort. Even seeing the light felt harsh and unwelcome, like the sky was illuminated by industrial lamps instead of a warm sun. It's not a nice change of pace, but it's a good change of pace from the previous flesh-filled levels of dangerous creatures you need to fight. And boy, let's finally get around to the combat, huh? This game emerged in an era when the phrase walking sim was synonymous to many people with unserious, uninteresting, and visually boring. This description has always been unfair. Walking sims are often my favorite because a well-crafted one means that you just have so much more time to spend with story, setting, and character. You can get really engrossed in them in a way that I deeply appreciate. I bring this up because I think the aforementioned attitude might have influenced the decision to add combat into the game, because it really doesn't feel like the focus of the game. The guns are awkward and hard to use, combat is very difficult to read and prepare for, and you're better off avoiding it whenever possible. You're often trying to dodge dark color projectiles in dark rooms, and the one battle where you need to use conventional gaming strategies feels out of place and awkward. I have two takes on this. The first is that against standard enemies, the combat is tolerable at best, but the creatures awkwardly flopping around, struggling to move, add to the game in a lot of ways. I don't want them removed. I feel like their presence in the game is actually really cool and does a lot for making the world still feel living and breathing. Mobile, fleshy masses slithering around is something I absolutely want, and the proper use of them would have improved the game immeasurably, but in their current state they just feel frustrating and annoying. I would love a Scorn safe mode the same way Soma did it. The combat is blunt and brutal and gross and out of place, but it's also designed with the hope it will fit in the world, and it is possibly the best version of the combat you could put in a game like this. There's something about the movement, the whines, the strange and awkward forms that just drives home how alien this whole world is. Even the attacks add to this a little. They're disgusting, smashing into you with full force or throwing up on you with acidic slime. They fit, even if they don't fit well. The combat at other times utterly ruins the horror of the game. In the climactic boss fight, there's a run-up. In it, you take a strange, clearly humanoid fetus and crush it to extract its blood. My script here says insert adrenochrome joke, so put your own. This first baby crushing is relatively easy, but you have to do it 2 more times. The second time is a slogging boss battle that ends with you getting a grenade launcher. I'm just going to say that the inherent horror of crushing an infant is lost on me when the baby can also kick my ass, and does so several times. I should not feel satisfied doing this, but I do. Fuck you, fetus. It's also hard to get around the fact that this really awful combat sequence happens right around the end of the game, which spoils the vibe. I should be enjoying this temple, letting myself soak in the atmosphere. It's clear how fast the plot moves, that Scorn was supposed to be a much longer game, and they cut a lot out. I could be wrong, but given how fast the game rushes towards its ending, it feels chopped, roughly, unevenly, uncleanly. I don't think including this combat sequence helps that feeling at all. I can't say what more funding or a longer dev time would have meant. I mean, this game was in development for years anyway. But I also don't feel comfortable saying a small indie studio from Serbia should be skewered for the flaws in a game that is so clearly a labor of love. I genuinely hope that Ebb keeps making games. I don't really have much more to say. This is a game so wildly open to interpretation and full of deep contrasts. On one hand, it's an immensely interesting and genuinely unsettling horror experience, one that I will love and adore for a long time. It's also a game that over many years of development had significant struggle, cutdowns, and more. It feels rushed in a way only a labor of love can be rushed. Like, I can feel the pain and potential the devs cut away. As that final hour approached and I blazed towards the ending, I felt satisfied, hurt, sad for a game that I knew had more to it, but I still loved what we got.